This video is sponsored by italki. Whether you are just starting out in your first foreign language or you're on to your 7th foreign language and you're always hungry to be better, in this video I've put together 5 habits that you can start using today to either begin your journey towards fluency or increase fluency, as well as build competence, deepen existing knowledge, just make you feel more at ease, just making everything better. And the best part is, none of these are specific to language learning or can only be done during your learning time. These habits can be implemented at any time, but will serve to enhance the power of your language learning time. Sort of like how certain foods make exercising easier, even though you don't eat them while exercising. That would be kind of weird. You get what I'm saying. I've made my point. Nu kör vi. So starting with a simple one. Would you like to spend more time every day with your target language?
Yes, please.
Do you feel like you would happily listen to it for an extra hour each day, but you don't have time?
Well, yeah.
Well, a lot of people feel like that, and you're gonna have to trust me a little bit on this one, but start carrying wireless earbuds or normal headphones everywhere.
So it doesn't look any dumber than AirPods, I guess.
Oh, but Lamont, I hear you say, I don't get long breaks during my day where it's actually worth it to sit down and listen to my target language properly. No, I know, neither do I. That's the entire problem, right? So we need to do the next best thing, which is to fill up the little periods of time that come in between everything else with your target language, because that time isn't allotted to anything anyway, but there is a lot of it. I would apologize for that, but future me is going to put it in the edit. So how I know that this works is that one week I decided to see how much of a given audiobook I would get through if I only put it on to fill the little gaps in my day. Well, I finished a 10-hour long audiobook within the week, and that's without putting in any active time. No sitting and listening, just 10-minute drives, 15 minutes of washing the dishes, etc. For a lot of people, this is going to be a leap of faith. Get yourself a cheap set of wireless earbuds and get in the habit of A, carrying them everywhere, and B, putting them in at any opportunity. You can even challenge yourself, like see if you can get through a 10-hour audiobook in the week, and you'll see that most of your week is taken up with these little in-between tasks, and we need to turn those tasks into language learning time. It obviously doesn't have to be an audiobook, it can be the news or a podcast, but even at a conservative estimate of 6 hours a week, you're still getting through an extra 300 hours of your language every year. Habit number 2 is to start learning unusually specific things about your target language. The reason I bring this up is that I think it can be overrated at the early stages of learning a language, like up to about B1, and underrated at the higher stages like C1 and especially onwards. And this is where I have found myself in the last year or so when it comes to almost trivial knowledge of my target language. I had been of the opinion that it's sort of just a pretentious party trick to know something like an alternative way of indicating time, something like the night is young or the gender of a word that you never actually have to conjugate according to its gender. That sort of stuff that native speakers know but only use in very specific circumstances. But I probably held on to that view for a little bit too long, and have only recently realized how beneficial learning this kind of detail can be. The benefits of this stuff are not necessarily conversational. You won't actually say these things very often, but it's the auxiliary benefits that are of interest to me. It helps you to notice more things. Like, specific examples are difficult, but when you know little tidbits and random facts, you tend to be able to concentrate on what you're listening to for longer. Sort of like a car enthusiast will notice and see more cars around them. Like, you'll walk past 100 cars and a normal person won't really notice or remember any of them, but a car enthusiast will be going, oh, that's the Honda that's lowered, that Audi has aftermarket rims. What's more is that it helps you to stay in love with your language, because if you know it more intimately, even the parts that you don't use very often or at all help it to stay interesting to you. Like, you can see things when you're reading, oh, there's that thing that you're allowed to write but you never actually say, that kind of stuff. So I'd encourage you, particularly if you're at B2 or higher, to get in the habit of learning unusually specific things and trivia about your language. Another problem that every human in every pursuit in the entirety of our existence has faced is overcoming an initial stage, an initial barrier, a hurdle, reaching a certain level of comfort and thinking, now what? And if someone were always able to know exactly what to do next in order to most efficiently progress in their chosen field, then they'd be immensely successful, because this is a universal problem across all walks of life. So unfortunately, I don't have the perfect answer for everyone, but I do know that it's always a good idea to just keep moving, and for that, I found no better tool than italki, who are sponsoring today's video. About 6 months ago, I made a video about taking a Swedish lesson on italki every day for 2 months, and I never did the follow-up video in which I was supposed to update everyone on how it went, not because I didn't complete the daily lessons for 60 days, I did, but because I felt like my notes and just everything from the conversations that I'd had and everything that had sort of been crammed into my brain in that time were already overflowing, and instead of making a video, I needed some time to actually sort this stuff out and learn it. And even though, yeah, I probably could have utilized those 60 hours a bit more effectively had I planned them better, when I think back on everything from the time that I started focusing entirely on Swedish all the way up until now, there are 2 periods of time that stand out as having easily the greatest effect on my Swedish. The first is the 57 hours I did back in 1 week in May 2020, and that included an hour a day of italki lessons. I feel like that week really cemented my level at B2, but the other time is those 60 days just late last year. I don't think my Swedish has ever improved in 2 months as much as it did in those 2 months, and that's a big statement because now we're talking C1, and as anyone will tell you, improving when you're at C1 is no easy thing. And that's what I love about italki. I can commit myself to my language by booking just 1 lesson, which serves as a great short-term incentive. Unlike other services, you don't have to commit to a certain number of lessons or a certain time period because there's no subscription fee. You just pay for the lessons you book. So you find a lesson you want, you book it, that's it. So when I book the lesson, I tend to be a lot more deliberate in my efforts leading up to it, but also I'm normally seeing a teacher whom I know personally. They're going to know when I've improved. They're going to hear small changes in accent, increases in fluency, that kind of thing. And that serves as an incentive for me to do that little bit of extra practice leading up to the lesson. Listen to that extra hour of the book, practice that extra sentence in my shadowing, learn that extra word, whatever it is. And that's all on top of the immense way that italki has already brought me. It's not at all an exaggeration to say that I wouldn't speak Swedish, certainly not to the level I do, if it weren't for italki, because the opportunity that I've had to speak to Swedes in real time is ridiculous. And you have that opportunity too, because there are tutors of over 150 languages. Some of the tutors are language lovers like us, others are qualified teachers of their language, so regardless of your preferred method of learning, there's a teacher to suit you. It's probably the biggest hub for any area of interest that I've ever been a part of, and I'd encourage you to be a part of it too. Check out their community page where you can ask questions and submit writing to be checked by native speakers, all of that and a bunch more, so sign up for free using the links in the description. They also offer rewards and credits from time to time. Very cool stuff. Thanks to italki for sponsoring today's video and keeping the lights on. Oh yeah, very funny. I get it. Yeah, huh. Oh, surprise, it was me the whole time. I've been pretty busy lately, but I'm thinking of setting myself another challenge like that one from late last year, because otherwise long periods of time where I just sort of allow myself to plateau or even drop off a little bit, they tend to creep in. So once you've created an italki account and checked it out for yourself, let me know, and I'm seriously asking, what would you do with a bunch of italki credit? Because I've got a whole heap of it and I'm genuinely trying to think of an awesome thing to do with it. So the third habit is to constantly be challenging yourself. Set yourself mini goals, mid goals, maxi goals. Make striving for more and constantly challenging where you're at a habit. Habit number 4 is my very favorite, and it's for everyone, but particularly those of you who feel like you can't hear detail in your target language that native speakers or even other learners of the language seem to be hearing this detail and you just can't. Build the habit of deep listening. This isn't necessarily talking about listening to the language. Deep listening is trying to hear more detail in everything. Now, the blessing and the curse of this one is that you can do it anywhere, anytime, and because it's so easy to start doing, you're probably going to forget. So don't start with something like listening to the patterns of the air of the room you're in. Now, that is actually something you can do, but if you're not already a practitioner of deep listening, that is not where you want to start. So instead, try sitting and listening to a song, and try to really listen to it. Can you hear one instrument more heavily coming from one side? Can you hear a breathy quality in the singer's voice? Are all the snare hits of exactly the same volume? Is everything perfectly in time? There is detail in every sound we hear that is far beyond our normal level of consideration, and our hearing is capable of far greater precision than our attention is. That is to say, if we can learn to amplify our attention to notice the detail that we can already hear, then you'll find new levels of detail in sound. And if you really build up this habit, which remember you can be doing all the time, it's not just when you're listening to your language, then your target language will literally become clearer to you. Even if you're at the stage where you still struggle with meaning, like words and grammar, you'll be able to isolate the unknown parts much more easily. And then of course with time, the fact that you can hear your language more clearly, little variations in accent, stress, voice, etc., that will make your accent better as well. I do want to do a whole video on this because I've been trying to get into deep listening myself, and it's a huge topic and I think a fascinating one. But to summarize, please try this. You'll amaze yourself and your language skills will improve. Habit number 5 is related to deep listening because you should always be trying to listen more deeply, and particularly to native speakers speak your target language. But have you ever listened to them speak your language, or what is for them a foreign language? And of course, when I say listened, I mean really listen. It's actually fascinating because unless they speak their foreign language, let's assume it's English, 100% perfectly without any trace of an accent, you can learn a lot just from how they speak English. I recently found a YouTuber named Peter Lindgren. It's quite a big channel, but I hadn't come across him before. And the name kind of gave it away, but I did watch a few videos before I found one in which he actually said that he was Swedish. But even before then, I didn't just have to rely on the name. There are a number of specifically Swedish clues, like very pronounced S sounds and hesitations on hard G's like G. Sometimes when Swedes say the G sound, the attack on that G is kind of delayed, almost like they're saying it in reverse, which is why a Swede was hired to write the musical score for Tenet.
True story.
But this goes further, because I know you might be thinking, how can you get better at Spanish by listening to a Spaniard speak English? I will admit that hard proof that this works is going to be hard to come by, but you do, without a doubt, get a look into the very core of consciousness of a native speaker. And because they're speaking what is hopefully your native language, you've got a clearer lens to examine that with. Now, I'll give you just one example of what I'm talking about. I could give you many, but here's one.
One of Sweden's small...
Now ignore the ultra-sibilant S, let's just listen to the stress on Sweden. Here it is again.
On the west coast of Sweden, it's called ström.
But now listen to what happens when he says something in the middle of that paragraph, just after saying something in Swedish.
Västkustpärlor, as we say in Sweden, it's...
Suddenly it's changed from Sweden to Sweden, as we say in Sweden. This one little feature of pronunciation reveals multiple layers of language. Firstly, it reminds me that Peter is from the west coast, like probably Gothenburg, because someone from Stockholm is unlikely to say Sweden. Here it is again on a different phrase, much more clearly this time.
And if you translate that to English, it's basically electricity town.
Did you hear it? It's not electricity town, it's electricity town. Electricity town. And that, in a handful of words in English, remember we're speaking English here, is an overview of the main pronunciation feature of Gothenburg Swedish.
Gothenburg joke for you.
Just ignore the fact that I'm talking about a language that you may not be studying. You can do this with any language, especially if you're at the point that you can hear differences in accent in your target language. See if you can hear those reflected when those people speak your language or any foreign language. I think it helps to bind your unconscious and conscious knowledge when you pick up on these sorts of things. But even more interesting than this is just when the change occurs and why. Now, I could seriously do a 30-minute video just on this, like the trigger that causes an accent to change on the same word where it otherwise wouldn't have.
Sweden's small. It's because of Sweden. It's called, we're saying Sweden. It's.
And what that tells us about the way our brains process language. But the point of these top 5 kinds of videos is to be a little bit simpler and to give you guys the best value for your time. So hopefully I do get the opportunity soon to do a whole video on what is revealed when non-native speakers of English speak English and all the stuff that tells us. That is much more likely to happen if you guys leave me a comment, give me a like, share this video with someone you know who might find it interesting, and obviously subscribe. Doing all that stuff helps to make the channel popular enough that I'll have the time to invest in those more in-depth kinds of videos. So make sure you do all that stuff. Thanks heaps for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.